breakfast.
Oh, yeah? Well, I'm telling you, Jojo Kracko is a bum, and you can tell him I said that, too. Oh, yeah? Button your lip, buddy. Don't make me come over to... Oh, it's you. Sit down. Make yourself comfortable. We've been waiting for you. Today's episode, all crime. That's why I'm wearing this hat. It's my crime hat. In 2020, it's easy to forget the sheer breadth and variety that was once available on the average spinner rack. In the days before the direct market and the dominance of the superhero genre, comics were seen as more of a generalized medium, providing options for all interests. Western, romance, humor, and horror all managed to claim a precious few inches of real estate on the crowded newsstands and spinner racks. Comics publishers attempted to produce books for every interest, no matter how fringe, and it's from these tattered fringes that crime comics originate. While titles like Dick Tracy had featured criminal elements as early as the strip's inception in 1931, the idea of an entire comic devoted to crime wouldn't bear fruit until Lev Gleason's Crime Does Not Pay appeared in 1942. Unlike Chester Gould's bizarre rogues gallery of characters, the criminals in Gleason's publication were based on real people and their actions. And while the stories that appeared in Crime Does Not Pay all ended with justice of one form or another for the criminal actor, these morals were considered secondary by critics who felt Gleason and company were actually glorifying crime. The title more or less had the field unto itself until 1947, with the post-war decline in the popularity of superheroes, leading comics publishers down new avenues. Crime as a genre exploded after that, growing alongside of horror as a true contender on the comics rack. Everyone got in on the act. Marvel, DC, EC. Pretty much anyone with a presence on the newsstand experimented with the crime format. As competition increased, the tone of the books grew ever more grim. Moral recompense for the criminals was now secondary, if it appeared at all. Crime comics seemed hell-bent on outdoing one another by offering the most sensationalistic and salacious take on the darker side of humanity. These left the genre wide open to charges of promoting juvenile delinquency, degeneracy, and general lawlessness, bringing it to the attention of community groups and law enforcement agencies. 1949 saw crime comics criminalized in Canada, merely the opening salvo in what would be a hard and brutal battle. By the time the Senate Subcommittee on Juvenile Delinquency wrapped its session on the subject at the end of June 1954, the writing was on the wall. Sweeping changes to comics were mandated, the establishment of a comics code designed to heavily regulate the content of any comics sold on American newsstands. And while genres like horror were able to retreat into code-safe corners of mystery, crime comics simply died. While publishers would experiment with the genre throughout the years and the gradual loosening of the comics code, crime comics would never again attain their once impressive status as a sales force on the newsstand. Our first book comes to us from that heady period, just from before it all came crashing down. This is Crime Cases Comics number 9 from Atlas. What a cover! As a kid, I was a sucker for cutaways, and this one is so cool. I love seeing all of the action here. It's like getting an entire page of story without all those pesky margins and borders. And this ties in with our main story, 1313 Center Street by the legendary Jerry Robinson, see? The Bowser gang is hiding out in a dilapidated house, waiting for the heat to blow over after their latest bank job.
a mysterious stranger appears. Not only does he know they're there, but he offers the hard-up criminals a chance to join the Black Angus mob. Angus has rented a sweet little spot in the suburbs for his gang to lay low. Soon they rob the local bank and get away scot-free, their proximity to the target allowing them to return to 1313 Center Street without being caught. Angus himself appears in short order. There's always at least one guy you gotta shoot to make your point in these stories. The gang, emboldened, move on to robbing a gambling boat. They get away with that, and it seems like the sky's the limit for the ambitious criminals. However, their attempts to shift their focus to the protection racket go awry. Because old guys are hardcore, Old Man Sanders goes directly to the cops, and they manage to get a lead on the criminals. Meanwhile, Slick leads a mutiny back at 1313. He's figured out that, for all of his big talk, Black Angus is, in fact, blind, and is using the gang to pull jobs he can no longer do himself. Before they can fit him with a lead straitjacket, the cops show up and just start strafing the house with gunfire. No warnings, no chance for surrender. They just open up and don't stop until whoever's left standing surrenders. It's pretty hardcore, with anyone who survives being executed.
1313 is rehabbed and turned into a youth home where comics just like this are hidden under mattresses and read under covers of darkness with a flashlight. How's that for bringing things full circle? Our next story also begins with some criminals hiding out in an empty building. Well, maybe criminals is too strong a word.
Red and his friends are entrepreneurs selling the health food Norito, which is just wheat with a dash of vitamin powder in it. Okay, it's not going to cure cancer, but at least they're not out robbing banks like the last guys. Smash cut to the basement of their store, where the boys are busting through a wall to rob the bank next door. Okay, so sue me. I like to assume the best of people. All seems Jake until Chief Mitchell waddles onto the scene. Seems he's noticed all the activity and has dropped in to see how the new business is doing. After being given a snow job and a few two-bit cigars by Red, the seemingly clueless cop takes a shine to the town's newest residents, going as far as accepting a dinner invitation from Red. Wow, look at the Chief's kids go, huh? Gee, they don't give us good eats like this at home. Who says crime don't pay? Emboldened, Red and his boys make the big move, breaking into the safe to discover a still full from dinner Chief Mitchell and a Tommy gun he seems very comfortable with. He's caught the boys dead to rights, sparking one of Red's cigars for the occasion. It turns out spite is great for stimulating your T-zone. Next up, we get the thing in the box. Okay, yeah. It sounds exciting, but in reality it's a turgid tale featuring men in rooms talking. Okay, there's a little bit about tracking stolen radioactive gold ingots with a Geiger counter, but even that is remarkably slow in the offing. Turns out no matter how much you insist to the contrary, a guy running around with a little red box that makes clicking sounds just isn't that exciting. This is the comic book equivalent of the movie Radar Secret Service, only without all the sexy shots of boxy gray cars driving around. In They Strike by Night, we hit the ground running. A cop is killed during a bank robbery at the height of a crime wave, and the chief of police is held accountable for the perpetrators remaining at large. Chief Barker calls in his good friend and crack Lieutenant Teddy Ford, who inexplicably refuses to take the case. Confused, the chief bitterly denounces Ford, but all is not as it seems. The lieutenant knows that his chief's ass is on the line, and what needs to be done has to happen outside of the law. Shortly, we find ourselves in a local bar. The punks are celebrating but run afoul of dead-eyed bruiser Rocky Bonham. Bonham mops the floor with the two-bit punks, but unluckily, they're the boys of gangster Walt Logan, and Bonham ends up nose to nose with the hardened criminal. Logan likes Bonham's moxie, and after a little verbal foreplay, invites the slab-jawed bruiser to join his gang. They head out to pull a big heist, but surprise! Turns out the racket is tumbled by the heat. Looks like there's a rat in their midst. Before the gang can turn this into a bloodbath, the building is stormed and the cops drag them off. Down at the station, Bonham is confronted about his role in all of this. To the chief's amazement, Bonham is actually Lieutenant Ford after extensive plastic surgery. Wow! Talk about earning that Christmas ham.
Crime Cases Comics number 9 is a great read. The stories, while a mite predictable, remain energetic and engaging. And while this issue doesn't feature any art from any big names like Charles Biro, the work is more than serviceable, with some nicely stylized action scenes. Now, hold on to your short boxes because we're jumping ahead 25 years for our next title. And hey, it's another Atlas comic. Only this is Atlas Seaboard, Martin Goodman's short-lived Spite company. Follow the link below to watch our great video on the subject. Now, this particular issue is Police Action number 3, featuring Lomax and Luke Malone, Manhunter. So, how have crime comics changed in 25 years? Let's find out.
Our comic begins with Taxi 2147 has been hijacked, already in progress. A New York City cab and its 3 passengers have been taken hostage by a Che Guevara type. Hey, it was the 1970s. Those dudes were everywhere. Anyway, our beret-wearing antagonist has demands. They've always got demands, man. It's nothing too heavy. He just needs a cool 10 mil and a plane to South America, and he'll be out of our hair toot sweet. However, Beardy here made one critical mistake. He came between Detective Lomax getting his nightly hot dog. For our longtime viewers, you can all attest to how seriously the lieutenant feels about his daily dose of New York City pollution-infused carcinogenic street meat-based product. He ain't happy is the takeaway here. Lomax is ordered to the airport, but he stops to break up a mugging. This guy is motivated, folks. And then, just like that, our hero's back on the case, and just in time. Now the hijacker is threatening to blow up the cab and everyone in it on the tarmac of LaGuardia Airport. Luckily, Sandy Duncan is there to turn the tide. She gives this Cuban wannabe a whack and grabs his gun. All right, star-spangled girl. However, Sandy is pressured into giving back his gun. After all, the guy still has his thumb on enough C4 to turn the taxi and whatever is unlucky enough to be nearby it into a very stylish hole in the ground. Lomax appears, but because someone watched Kojak last night, the next few pages are weighed down in your stereotypical male pissing contest. Stuff is boring and it doesn't do anything to move the story forward. In the end, Lomax just kind of sneaks up on the guy and he gives up. Considering the hot dog-based mayhem of the previous issue we enjoyed, and this one is kind of a disappointment.
Not to worry, though, as the second half of the book is devoted to Luke Malone, Manhunter, a hard-drinking, no-nonsense, Dirty Harry type sure to make up for Lomax's slack. I hope.
A tense hostage situation at the First City Bank of San Francisco sees Malone having to make a quick decision, and if he blows it, innocents will die. Unfortunately, he's stuck waiting for orders from headquarters that never seem to come. The robbers are pinned down in the bank and are demanding a getaway plane. Maybe they should have coordinated this little caper-wache in the first story. I mean, if you're going to hijack a plane in the summer of 1975, you might as well cram as many criminals on there as you can. There is an oil crisis coming, and we've only got one Earth, folks. And while for the rest of the cops on the scene, this is just another dog day afternoon, for Malone, it's serious business. Turns out his wife Mary got herself hostage along with the other bank patrons. Malone gives the order to rush the bank. The first 2 bank robbers are taken out, but Mary ends up a human shield, complicating things. A concealed sharpshooter takes out the gunman, but the twitch of the death nerve causes the muscles in the thug's hand to contract, shooting Mary Malone. Oh my, don't you know? Luke blames himself. He's thrown off the force and descends into an alcoholic haze, but fellow cop Joe Wong finds him and, after the obligatory fisticuffs, informs Malone that the man responsible for planning the crime that caused his wife's death is still at large. While he can no longer be a cop, Wong tells Malone that he can become a private investigator and bring his wife's killer to justice. Before they can drink on it, Joe Wong is killed by a nearby assassin. The killer approaches, intending to finish the job, but Malone gets the drop on him and shoots his foe dead. He then tosses the liquor aside. The drinking can wait. This happy hour, the special, is revenge. It's a decent setup for a bigger series that would never come. Malone shared police action with Lomax until Atlas sputtered to an end, so if he did get his revenge, it's a tale yet to be told. Unlike its predecessor, it would be hard to argue that this book glorifies crime. All of the criminals here are skeezy deadbeats, but unfortunately the protagonists don't offer much more in the way of heroic virtue. Granted, this book came out smack in the middle of the 1970s, so gritty cops were all the rage. That said, without the charisma of a Clint Eastwood, or at least the brute machismo of a Charles Bronson, these type of stories often sound better than they read. That said, it's an Atlas. What do you expect? We wrap things up with a great little story from the early 1980s. While America had more or less lost interest in the subject of crime comics, creators over in Europe ran with the ball, producing some truly remarkable books featuring the subject. One of my personal favorites is Torpedo 1936, written by Enrique Sanchez Abuli and drawn by Jordy Bennett. Now, I first read this story in another anthology whose name frankly escapes me, but it had enough of an impact on me that I looked for future work featuring the titular Torpedo. Our story begins with a rude awakening in the form of our hero being roused from his slumber by gun-toting thugs. Mob boss JT wants Hitman Torpedo to sink Frankie forever, a gangster who's made a habit of getting shot but not getting dead. With 10 grand on the line and saying no a non-starter, Torpedo takes the job. But how to put Frankie forever in the ground permanent-like? Well, like any man, Frankie has a weakness in the form of beautiful dames, and Torpedo knows just the ticket. He recruits Susie What's-Her-Name, a high-class call girl who's game for anything if the money is right. And Torpedo can afford to be generous in his offer. He's planning on double-crossing her when all is said and done. He rents a room next to Frankie's safe house and lays in wait. Susie plays the bait, and Frankie falls hook, line, and sinker, taking her home. Meanwhile, Torpedo has tipped the cops off to Frankie's little love nest, and they drop by to trade bullets with his boys. Frankie suspects Susie of ratting him out, but she plays him like a dope long enough to lure him to the balcony. It's there Torpedo waits, ventilating the mobster with a close rain hail of machine gun fire. The building is surrounded by the fuzz. How to escape? Torpedo's already doped that out. He and Susie dress like newlyweds, and they simply saunter off, the cops even holding the door for them. It seems like the perfect crime, but the game isn't over. Before Torpedo can get his 5 G's back, Susie's pimp Reno pops out of the back seat. Surprise! It turns out you can't trust a hooker, even an expensive one. Torpedo loses his take, but gets a nice conversation starter in the form of a jagged scar. He heads back to his office and pours himself a drink, delicately considering his wounded cheek and how to settle up with What's-Her-Name. The book's creators pull no punches here. Unlike crime cases, gritty but law-abiding cops, or police actions, urban warriors, Torpedo is just as much of a scumbag as the men and women he interacts with. He's simply the hero by default here, the lead in a world where virtue and idealism will get you one in the head for your trouble. It's not pretty, but like most things that are compelling, it's hard to look away from.
I'm Jason Mink from the Old Guys Who Like Old Comics Network. Now, I had a lot of folks ask me where to get one of these t-shirts here, see? Maybe one of these nice mugs for your mom, maybe your dad, maybe for yourself. Maybe you deserve it. Well, follow the link below to get merch like this and other fantastic stuff that goes directly to supporting the Old Guys Who Like Old Comics Network. I'm Jason Mink. I'll see you next week at breakfast.